Hey there, YouTube. I'm Yukitsu. This is Yukitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of Steel Division Normandy 44. So, I want to talk a little bit about one of the most important things to getting into this game and understanding what the hell it is you're supposed to be doing, because a lot of the time you'll spam out a bunch of troops that you think are going to be good because it fits your faction and fits what you think you're going to need. Because, you look at it and you're saying, oh yeah, I'm up against the Panzer so I'm up against a Panzer division, so I need to have certain things going for me. But, and then you find out that they didn't start with any tanks, because they can't start with any tanks, because they don't start with any Phase A tanks. And then you get rolled by infantry and support trucks because that's what they've got, and then you get into Phase B and you're like, well, I got rolled by a bunch of support trucks, so maybe this guy's going for that kind of strategy, and then Phase B hits and there's a King Tiger, or a Tiger E actually, rolling through your base, and you're like, well, I don't understand what's going on, I surrender. So, this game is a lot about the matchup. It really does matter hugely what you're playing as and what you're playing against, and sort of depending on what you're playing as and what you're playing against, the match is going to be very different. And that's one of the things I like most about this game. Now, this is undercut by the fact that, like, only, I think I would say that the French, the Canadians, the 101s, maybe the third armored get played. I think that's about all that people really sort of seriously play. And if you look at the Axis side, all I ever really see is the Fallschirmjägers, the Panzerlehr, the SS Panzergrenadier, and the SS Panzer, because the balance of this game is not necessarily where it should be. But, despite that, that's still quite a good amount of variety. But still, despite that, the most important thing for you to do is pick your faction and understand sort of like the matchups that it's going to be facing. Because let's say that I'm playing the 3rd Canadian Infantry, because that's what I mostly play as, because as I said, pick someone, figure them out, and learn the matchups. The way that I play these guys is extremely different depending on whether or not I'm playing against the Fallschirmjäger, as compared to if I'm playing against the SS Panzer. And despite the fact that the Fallschirmjäger are an airborne company, which, is basically, well, actually, let's say that, playing against the SS Panzer is extremely different than playing against the Panzerlehr, despite the fact that they're both armor divisions, like both of these say armor division on them. Now, like, if I play against Panzerlehr and they take a lot of SDKFZs, and I play against an SS Panzer player who takes a lot of SDKFZs, that's okay. So sure, it's similar in that sort of case, but the SS Panzer, I have to play around the Butte Firefly because that's a big part about them, whereas when I get up against the Panzerlehr, I don't have to worry about that. Instead, I have to worry about the sort of faster tick in the early game, and the fact that their Phase C is going to roll over literally anybody in the game because they get 150 points per minute, whereas the SS Panzer get a much more respectably normal amount of 135. And also, like, these guys have got access to slightly better late-tier tanks, in my opinion. So, depending on what I'm up against, even if they're both armored, that can make the game very, very different. And if I'm playing as, say, the Canadians and I'm up against the 716 Infantry, that, again, is so different than if I'm playing up against someone else, like, say, again, the SS Panzer, because these guys play more like an Allied division. And the fact that they get 100 points in recon is just absolutely mind-boggling in terms of what they can manage to accomplish in terms of flooding the field with crappy troops, because that's what the 716 Infantry is all about. Just cover everything in Osttruppen. That'll be how that's how things go, which is kind of weird because, like, the Osttruppen do cost 20 points, which is more than the Canadian Infantry, and these guys are arguably crappier, but we'll ignore that for now. So, I would say that for the most part, you need to sort of look at your faction that you're playing as and figure out what the strengths and weaknesses of it are and how that relates to your enemy. Like, if I look at the Canadian Infantry, what do I know about these guys starting off? Well, I've got access to the Stormtroopers, which is a very, very powerful early game infantry unit. We can take a look at the stats here. We got the Stormtroopers. They've got a humongous amount of high explosive damage and accuracy, thanks to their early game Sten guns and MP40s once they get into very close range, and then they can instantly destroy a unit thanks to the ridiculousness that is the TNT. Now, if I'm playing smartly, what I do is wait until I hear them being out of ammunition, then I hit B immediately. So they immediately pop smoke and they become invisible. So I could do that if I was smart. I never do it because I'm not. But that's something that the Canadians have access to. And what else is unique about these guys? Well, they've got really, really cheap infantry here. These guys have 1-star veterancy, and they're a very solid infantry unit. They only cost 15 points. Thanks to the fact that they've got the star of veterancy, this damage value is actually pretty comparable to the Osttroopen, who have cost more and are less reliable in terms of the morale. So these guys are quite decent, even though the damage values are quite low, thanks to that increase in accuracy. We can take a look. They've sort of got the ability also to take the early game Kangaroo with 1-star veterancy. This is a very, very durable infantry carrier with a pretty decent heavy machine gun. Not very much ammunition on the Kangaroos, but these things are able to sort of help you lock down an area pretty effectively. If you really need an 800 range HMG, this thing can actually get at you that. So, maybe you don't actually need the Vickers HMGs here, because you can instead get the Kangaroo. You can also get the command carrier, which has the medium machine gun. It's kind of crappy, blah, blah, blah. But, you can get lots of those for whatever reason. But anyway, yeah, and moving into the later game, you can see that you can get a bunch of the Assault Pioneers if you really need to break through something in the late game. You can also look at what makes the Canadians unique here, and you can see that they've got the Ram 2 here. Now, this didn't exist in the actual war. This was a training tank for the Canadians, but it's a unique tank that they get for some reason. I don't really know why they decided to add it in, but what it does is it adds a unique element to the Canadians, because it is the second best Phase A tank in the game, and it is the toughest Phase A tank in the game. Thanks to the fact that it's got 12 front armor, it's got an 11 AP gun, it's able to take on any German tank except the Butte Firefly in Phase A. And that means that this thing is incredibly powerful if you want to push through an opponent who's going to be relying on half-tracks and armor and stuff like that, and isn't capable of penetrating that 12 front armor very easily. And especially if you're able to locate and destroy his anti-tank gun emplacements, the Ram 2 is going to be an extremely, extremely potent pushing force in that first phase. So what do I understand about this? Well, I just said that this is the second best tank in the game. This means that if I'm up against the 12th SS Panzer, who has access to the Butte Firefly, I know that I don't have the ability to just have an invincible super tank that destroys an infinite number of SDKF sets, because this tank is not capable of taking out the key tank that they have. Now, I can take 2 Rams, but that's 280 points. That's pretty expensive. Now, admittedly, the Butte Firefly costs 200 points, so it's actually not that unfair a comparison between them and 2 Rams. The problem is that there definitely is a chance that the one Butte Firefly is going to be able to take out 2 Rams and still not be dead, because it's got the 1,200 range, while these guys have 1,000. So, but if you're up against the Panzer IIs or the Panzer 35L6 or whatever, or something like, I can't remember what the hell they're called, but the really weak one that a lot of the factions have, you can take the Ram and expect this to be able to push through enemy armor ridiculously effectively. And that's something that's unique to these guys. But again, it's also important to realize that maybe you're up against one of those factions that has access into a Phase A Pack 43. And if you're up against a Phase A Pack 43, this rolls a little bit forward, it gets shot in one shot by a Pack 43 88mm with its ridiculous 22 armor penetration, you're going to be pretty sad about that. So it really just depends on what you know about your opponent and what faction you're up against. So let's take a look at a match up that I had against another faction that I'm sort of familiar with, but not super familiar with. So let's take a look at what I was playing up against. I was playing up against the 17 SS Panzer Grenadier. So these guys have access to pretty decent scout cars here, the SPW 222. Now, the thing about this is that I know that the SPW 222 loses against the Humber Mark III, and I take a crap load of the Humber Mark IIIs. I know as well that these guys tend to take lots of the SPA troops. Personally, I don't like the SPA troops, but these guys are pretty okay at actually fighting. So I do have to watch out for the fact that they've actually got more infantry through the use of the SPA troops, spy troops basically, as compared to the Canadians, who use recce and sniper squads, which not really the best combatants necessarily. Going into the infantry tab, I know that these guys have got very, very effective anti-tank infantry, thanks to things like the stormtroopers here. Now, I also know that the stormtroopers, despite having very good stats, do lose against the Canadian stormtroopers in close quarters combat, so I can reliably have the Canadian stormtroopers wipe these guys out, thanks primarily to the stormtroopers having that TNT bundle where they just one-shot the squad, which is always a great thing there. Panzer Grenadiers, I know that these guys are significantly better than the Canadian rifles, so I have to sort of watch out for that. I know that they've got access to the MG42, which is 800 range and is a very, very effective tool for locking down and suppressing huge areas of the battlefield. I also know that they've got access in phase Phase B to the Sturm Pioneers. These guys tend to get taken a little bit less than the regular Pioneers, and I know that they're going to be able to push quite effectively. These guys trade very, very well against most Canadian infantry at any range because they've got access to a very good machine gun. They've got access to decent short-range guns. They've got access to an OK rifle, and they've got access to that short-range frag that just wipes out close-range troops. I know that if I'm up against these guys, I don't have anything to worry about in terms of tanks. Now, the Stug 3 could potentially joust and beat a Ram tank, but I tend to find that it doesn't, and usually the Stug 3, because of its limited mobility and its turret rotation, tends to lose that fight. But also, if you don't want to risk it, you can just take the Stug 3 out with a 6-pounder pretty effectively, and it's not really that great a tank. And you see that they sort of stay that way throughout the entire game. So the Shermans are quite effective against these guys because they don't really end up with a tank that can beat you. Once you get to the support tab, you do want to worry about the IG-18s and less about the IG-33s or the Grill, but that's something you kind of could worry about potentially. You know, going into this matchup, you know that they aren't going to have as many of the really good half-tracks. They're kind of limited to getting the SPW-222, which I think is one of the better ones from the support recon tab, and they don't get very many of them in terms of numbers there. And since most people take spot troops, they usually don't get them anyhow. Now, some people I think can take the SPW-221 PZ Panzer B41. I don't actually think very many people do that though, so hard to say for sure. You could also potentially see some people taking some really weird stuff, but you know, I'm not going to worry about those since that's not really a key feature of these guys. Now, in terms of anti-air, I do know that these guys have some pretty decent stuff, but I also know that they don't have the Flak 88, so I don't have to worry about that. I just have to worry about some pretty decent Flak stuff, but most people don't tend to spam out enough of it to really make it that interesting. I do have to worry about the artillery, the fact that they've got access to things like Nebelwerfers, they've got access to 4,000 range anti-infantry artillery here in the form of Multier. That can be extremely difficult to actually deal with there. And lastly, I know that they've got access to the Ju-87, which is a very, very powerful anti-tank plane, able to shred through basically an infinite number of planes if you don't deal with it properly. And I know as well that Focke-Wulf 198 is pretty damn good. It is generally more than a match for the Canadian Spitfires, and they've got a decent access to it. They could actually take quite a few of them if they wanted to. So let's go ahead and take a look at sort of the matchup and go with sort of my strategy here based around what I know about them. Now, one of the things that I'm going to say off the bat here is that I lose a crap load of troops in this particular battle, and it's actually fairly close. But one of the things that I know that the Canadians can do is that they can out-attrition the SS Panzer Grenadier because they've got access to simply more troops, they've got access to more vehicles, they've got access to more anti-tank guns, and more everything. Like, you can take a look even at my air tab here, we've got access to something like 6 Spitfires that I can actually just throw into the fight there. We've got access to some Typhoons that I've just got for the hell of it, for hunting down half-tracks and stuff like that in the late game. And all of this combined, you know, I can throw an awful lot into the meat grinder against an SS Panzer Grenadier player. They're much more reliant on that support tab than I am, but I've still got a little bit in there, but we'll ignore that for now. So anyway, let's go take a look at the particular matchup. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this sort of matchup and sort of, we're going to put it on like ×3 speed here, but we can see that like my opponent setting up his stuff here, he's got some Schwimm and he's got some like typical stuff that we expect here. We know that he's not got access to the same kind of, actually no, this is the right match. Okay, so yeah, my opponent's got access to some of the things that you expect to take against Canadians. Like he's got access to an AT gun, which is something super, super important for them. A little bit less AT than I would have expected, but I'm not taking the Ram to start with anyway. I think that taking it's kind of a risk. We're taking a couple of the anti-tank guns on our sides just because this map sort of has a couple sight lanes that I think are quite good for that. So we're just making sure to have a little bit of coverage so that we can potentially snipe a couple of these half-tracks and stuff like that. Because Canadians don't have necessarily the best of the anti-tank infantry, so the Humber Mark IIIs are great, but I've only got so many of them. Well, I could actually have just taken 6 of them because they cost less than the anti-tank emplacements, but you know, whatever. In any event, you can see my opponent running forward here. We see the SPW-221 PZ B41. These things are kind of wonky in that they actually still lose against the Humbers a lot of the time, I find. Now, they have got an 8 power anti-tank weapons, so they are something quite formidable against early tanks. But if it had run into a ram, then obviously it's getting screwed. It does wipe out one of my Bedfords, which had some rifles in it, like right away there. So pretty lucky that he managed to get the hit on the first shot there, opening up, exchanging fire. Now this is sort of a weird flank here. Pushing forward with the 6-pounder, and I'm unfortunately going to have to push it back because my goddamn opponent's MG42 can somehow see it, which is a little bit weird because the Afklaur has only got like one veterancy, so it's a bit weird they can see that. Exchanging fire, but all the sort of normal stuff over there. Now over here, we've got access to a bunch of our infantry and stuff like that. We're up against some spot troops, and we're up against some Panzer Grenadiers, and we're up against the Stormtrooper, who's got access, of course, to the Panzerfaust, which is going to be able to get in close against these command carriers and kangaroos and start wreaking some havoc. But for now, I feel like I'm pretty confident. Now, we're getting pretty unlucky in that we haven't caused a single goddamn kill so far against even the spot troops. Get pinned down pretty much immediately with our rifle leader, but yeah, that's kind of the way of things. So anyway, we're sort of pushing forward with what we've got here. We do have enough numbers here to sort of push forward, even though we're going to take losses on things like our kangaroos and our command cars and stuff like that. I don't have to care too much that that's happening. Over here, things are going as they are, and I've got plenty of room to sort of push up over on... I'm sort of focusing more on my pushover on this side here, and we're able to sort of grind him down slowly and eventually. Now, he has got an infantry gun 18, but the Canadians just have access to more of this infantry, and because I've got access to more of this infantry, I'm going to be able to keep pushing forward against him. Getting shots in on this IG-18, and that's going to be really bad for him, and since he doesn't have any ability to bring in armor here, he's forced to sort of contend with these Sobtroop, and like, that's not going to work too well against this kind of push. These rifles are going to be able to deal quite a lot of damage. This kangaroo, I think, does eventually go down to the Sobtroopen. Or maybe I take out the Sobtroopen, actually. Yeah, we lose the tracks, but then we kill the Sobtroopen, and then I've just got a kangaroo sitting here for the rest of the match for some damn reason. But anyway, you can see that, like, just because of how much infantry I was willing to waste into this fight here, into this meat grinder, I was able to sort of push forward into it. By contrast here, like, this is too much. So what I do is I bring up a 2-inch carrier and start lobbing some shells into there. What I should have actually brought was like a 25-pounder and an aircraft, but whatever. So we bring that up and start pummeling them a little bit, and my opponent is forced at this point to take in his Stug 3 F/8. Now, I have got still my rifle leader here, so I have got some anti-tank capability, and we're able to pin down again the IG-18 and start firing at it and what have you, but yeah, Panzer Grenadiers over here now under fire from my infantry, and they're sort of pinned down and getting shot at by this kangaroo, which is a lovely situation for him to be in, and we're pushing up with these rifles and able to sort of pin down and deal some really good damage against the Panzer Grenadiers. Now, he does start opening fire with the SPW-221 Panzer B41, which has very good AP value against the kangaroo, and I do also start losing this rifle squad, but we were running up with some Humbers just for the hell of it, just instantaneous and fast support, just getting them in there. We're going to drop the guys out of there, and that's fine. Over here, you know, things are sort of bogged down. Like, we're lobbing some 2-inch shells at this MG42, and we're sort of trading fire back and forth. This rifle unit's getting chipped away at from long distance, but it's not doing any damage, so my opponent here dropping an IG-18. At this point in time, we're getting a slow tick because the Canadians, again, able to do this sort of slow push forward, and pushing forward with another Lloyd carrier at the 6-pounder. I sort of deploy it before I get too far forward, because once I hit this area here, this little tiny dip in the road, I basically get instantly screwed. Recce heading into the buildings there, and we got the Humber that's going to be able to take out the Afklaur. I think what ends up happening actually is that I take out the Afklaur, but I lose my infantry to a single shot from, like, I think it was the IG-18 that got it. Any event, Humber sort of pushing forward here a little bit, and it's going to run into a Stug, and the Stug is not something you want to be fighting with a Humber. We do bounce a shot, and we do instantly lose the guy. We take some hits there, but that's all fine. And my opponent's playing pretty okay, honestly, but you can see that I'm getting some points here, and we're sort of pushing forward. We're able to finally get that aircraft that I was saying that I needed to get, and we're getting all these shots in the Pak-38. And if I'm able to take out the Pak-38 and the IG-18, then he's going to be in a little bit of trouble, but he's still got them just on that one troop there. We're able to push forward as well into here with a unit of Stormtroopers, and that means that we're going to win that area. Now the Stug over here is going to start blasting away at my stuff, and it's a little bit unfortunate since I don't have anything that can really counter it, but it's sort of rolling past troops that it's not going to be able to see, so I don't have to worry too much about that. I think I run these rifles for no damn reason across the road in front of a Stug, but that's kind of fine. So, At this point in time, let's take a quick stop here. Now, I do manage to take out this IG-18, so what are my advantages at this point in time? Well, I've lost a crap ton of infantry, but I still have access to a crap ton of infantry. And we're into Phase B now, so I've got access to the Sherman tank, which is a very, very strong tank and capable of pushing forward against an SS Panzergrenadier faction. Now, my opponent at this point in time probably needs to focus on his airplay to a certain extent, but with me already in the skies, it's not necessarily going to be easy for him to sort of rule that, because the Spitfires are actually pretty credible against that sort of thing. Now, he could try to break through this area. He actually has the means to do so. All he would need is access to any sort of rocket artillery that's able to sort of spread a lot of chaos across this wide area here. And we can see an Opel Blitz heading this way with some artillery, so we're going to see what that is. But I think that was just another infantry gun. I'm forced to fall back across this side, though, and my opponent is actually making good ground on this side, and I'm forced to bring up some stormtroopers to just sort of hold back and wait until he sort of pushes forward. But we're able to push up with our Humber here to sort of try and counter. We know where his Stug 3 is, and his Stug 3 is in a terrible spot. It's not really going to be able to help at all there. Firing some mortar shots just into the void there. I think we eventually kill something with it, but right now it's just aiming at nothing. So still lots of fighting over here. We were able to take out a quick unit of Panzergrens there that were trying to flank around with our Stormtroopers. The Stormtroopers start getting wrecked by the Stug, but they stop being visible. Again, see the Junker 87 heading in and doing some damage with the Humber here. Still able to deal some damage, able to take out a Panzer Grenadier, and that is perfectly fine. Able to push forward against another unit of Panzer Grenadiers, and we're seeing the Schwimm with some command infantry in there. Not going to be able to necessarily do much. We see our Humber taking a shot from the IG-18, returns fire against it, and is able to sort of take it out if I recall correctly. I think we take it out before we die. Nope. Alright, well, whatever. But we push forward with some rifles to try and take it out. And here comes the first Sherman. And again, like I was saying, like the Sherman capable of dealing some pretty good damage here. I see a vehicle at this point, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that it was just a grill. I could have actually just pushed forward with attack move, but he has got some stormtroopers here, so that would have actually been pretty dangerous. I can't believe he gets that shot with that grill. Push forward with the Sherman 3. I think we actually lose to the Stug in this particular joust here. Maybe I don't. I can't remember for sure. But we have got the 6-pounder like creeping up behind the Stug, so it doesn't really matter even if I did lose here. What ends up happening is his driver gets knocked out and he accidentally switches fire to the Humber, so it's kind of a derpy-ass fight here. I think I actually win this one without losing the Sherman. Yeah, so I did win this one without losing the Sherman because the 6-pounder managed to get the shot off first. Sherman gets back into position, and at this point I've got a very commanding position against my opponent. He's forced to bring in an SKFZ with the anti-tank gun, which is a big investment for the German player, just because like these tanks, if I keep them in defensive positions, like not like what I'm doing here where I'm pushing forward with the Sherman for no goddamn reason, although it is taking a lot of shots from these packs to destroy it, he does end up destroying it. But you know, this isn't that expensive and I can keep taking these. We're able to fire some mortar fire. I think we actually kill the Pak 38 off in this barrage here. Yeah, we do end up killing that Pak 38 there. But we did lose our tank, and you know, the still got a Pak, and he still got an IG-18, and so on and so forth. But we still have a lot of domination over the battlefield. Still getting that +1 tick, despite the fact that we've only got a little bit more than they do. But anyway, yeah, like this tank, very, very difficult for him to deal with. We're able to push forward with another unit of stormtroopers, and they're able to get in this close distance here. And you really don't want to be fighting against stormtroopers in close distance. He loses his command unit pretty much right away. They've got Pak 40 75mm. And we've surrendered their unit there. We're able to sort of push forward here against the Aufklärer. They get taken out pretty easily. And we were able to sort of drop some bombs on their IG-18 and their Pak 48 there, taking that out pretty much immediately. This gives my Sherman the ability to sort of push forward and move forward against him. And I'm just sort of moving forward, and there's nothing in this area anymore to stop him. And so we're just focusing on taking out his anti-tank options, because I know that my opponent doesn't have unlimited anti-tank, and I know that I can fight anti-tank, or I can fight tank-to-tank against him all day and come out ahead on that. I just have to worry about his anti-tank capability, his AT capability. He's come in with some Storm Pioneers, and they were able to take out the remnants of my shock troops, so this village is going to be lost temporarily, but I'm able to get it back pretty much eventually. So I think I lose the Sherman here. Actually, no, I took out that one. Okay. Yeah, Sherman, like, this is what I was saying when I was saying, like, the Stugs are pretty bad around corners, so it's just the way it is. Pushing forward with the Humber, because I know that he doesn't really have anything here that can actually contest it. getting some long-range artillery shots from a Sexton against a Panzer Grenadier. Getting some flames down to my Humber, and my Humber's forced to fall back just because I would surrender it eventually if I didn't. Sexton actually manages to take that out, which is pretty good, but it's not actually an important target. I should actually be aiming the Sexton at the MG42 over here, and then over at the what is this, Nebelwerfer? Yeah, Nebelwerfer 41. So my opponent actually does have the tool I was talking about earlier here, and this is something that I should have been more cognizant of and a little bit more worried about, and that is the fact that this Nebelwerfer can just sort of demolish this entire fortified area here and force me back really, really hard, and then allow his troops to all surge forward into the gap that creates. And now we can see that Nebelwerfer actually loading up a shot here. Now we are running +1 with a pretty high percentage in our favor. We've run up some anti-tank guns here to try and fight over here, but we're getting some misses against the Stug. Now the thing is that my Sherman here is going to run into the stormtroops, who are set to not fire until fired upon, so they're actually going to be able to take out my Sherman there, because I didn't know they were there. We're going to be able to fire some shots, though. My 6-pounder is going to be able to start moving forward again, and we're sort of like kind of derping up here a little bit, honestly, but driver knocked out of the Stug, and that's going to give us an opportunity to fire another shot here, and that's going to kill that one off. So he's running out of Stugs pretty badly as well. Able to get a surround off on these stormtroops and stuff like that, so that's going to be a kill for us as well. But you can see that my opponent is able to deal some pretty good damage to me in these counterattacks. We're coming in with our own air, but my opponent really, again, should actually be focusing on getting an air domination against me. Able to knock out that Panzergren. I should be falling back to these stormtroops because they're going to get captured, but whatever. Storm Pioneers heading forward. They've also got an SPW 2 Panzer 41. Now the thing about this is that it can't actually do anything. Able to take out one of their fighters. They really needed these. Like I was saying, he needs to be able to take command of the skies at this point in time. Now, over here, we can take a pause here because we're into Phase C now. This is the point where Germans technically hold an advantage, but not necessarily the SS Panzer Grenadiers. They don't have that same sort of really, really strong late game that some of the other factions have, and I know this. I know that, like, I'm facing a guy and I've got 1,276 points up over him. So I can just keep throwing people into the meat grinder, just try and hold the position and sort of make him sort of really wary about moving forward. And that's sort of what I'm going to do here. So we're losing tons and tons of troops. We're losing lots of fights, but it doesn't matter that I'm doing that. We're able to just sort of keep them contained and keep them pressured and sort of keep our troops at the ability to push forward. Now, it's kind of ridiculous that this stupid Sturm Pioneer won't die and that our units keep instantly getting pinned over and over again, but whatever, that's just the way it is. Able to fire our Sexton now at the IG-18 finally. I should still be finding out where that Nebelwerfer is, but whatever. If he does do a good Nebelwerfer hit, and he has done some Nebelwerfer hits, and it has caused some significant damage to my infantry that are holding up in this village here, he could easily have pushed forward at this point in time. Especially thanks to the Martyr, he could have actually done some pretty good damage around there. In any event, we got like some troops locked down because the MG42, as I mentioned, insanely good at locking down an area. Just a little bit too good almost. Got a Humber coming in. We got some more ammunition for it. We got another Sherman coming in. This could actually take out the Sherman pretty effectively, but not too worried about that right now. The Humber coming in, though, is going to be able to deal some pretty good damage against these Sturm Pios that are still there. We've got some infantry opening up. But it's kind of ridiculous. Like, look how much damage these guys have taken. My guys are actually running out of ammunition here. We've finally taken out that stupid unit there. Sneaking around the flank with some rifles over here, but another Junker dive bombs comes in, destroys my 6-pounder. So I'm running out of anti-tank as well, but I don't have to worry about anti-tank as much as my opponent does, because my opponent has to worry about Shermans and Fireflies and Wolverines and stuff like that, whereas all I have to worry about is Stugs. And, like, a Stug isn't really that great for a push forward, honestly. It's just doesn't have the attributes you want for that kind of push. Our Kangaroos are running out of ammunition. In fact, all our troops on the side have been fighting so long that they're running out of ammunition, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. We're actually running out of rifle ammunition for these guys even, so that's kind of fun. I'm finally firing at the stupid right target of the SMG over here. Up comes like a Bioschwim, and like the combination of the off map along with the Raketenwerfer, Nebelwerfer rather, is really just should be enough to push me off this point completely, especially with all these depleted troops that have low ammunition. I'm running into some Crusaders to try and get some additional points in here, but at this point in time, like, it's 13 minutes away. He has to start getting a lot of points back and a lot of ground back. I'm starting to lose over here pretty badly, but We're also out of ammunition for these stupid rifles. Ugh, God. Anyway, pop into this building here. At point-blank range, the Panzer Grenadiers start losing pretty badly against my troops. And he's been wasting a lot of shots with these Panzer Grenadiers against these guys here. Like I said, the Panzer Grenadiers have a lot more firepower thanks to those the fact that they've got 2 of those machine guns, but we're still able to eventually take this one out here, especially once he runs out of machine gun ammo. Over here, like, my opponent, sensing weakness, has finally started pushing forward. Saab Truppen have been doing a very good job for him, just because I don't have a great counter to them in this sort of dense jungle, since I'm running out of shock troops. I think he might have been trying to wear me down with shock troops to a certain extent. Starting to lose our Crusader AAs, which is really, really bad, and I think we actually lose both of them to the Marder, but that's fine. Starting to finally fire a little bit at the Nebelwerfer and the SK-18, which I shouldn't actually be worried about the SK-18, honestly. Marder also firing shots across at like random ass units, but I'm not too worried about these guys getting killed. It's not really that important at this point in time. Another Junker 87 coming in. So yeah, at this point in time, like, it really just is, he's going to have to be worried about armor pushes, and he's pretty well defended against them. I have to worry about his support weapons taking out my armor, and his infantry being effective against me at close range. Here we're using Humbers, because again, these guys, he's running out of anti-tank options, and you can use these damn things pretty effectively against an against tank sort of things here. Half-track over here starts getting wrecked up by my Humbers, ends up falling back. I don't think I kill it here, but in comes a Ju-85, able to wipe out, if I recall, a Recce. Can't remember what he takes out with that. Evacs either way, doesn't seem to have done anything, but we're just holding up lots of room here. We're just throwing lots of stuff into the meat grinder. We're forced at this point in time to have like Assault Pioneers move forward, and we're sort of running in with like our early game ram tank that I never bothered bringing in early, because my opponent's running out of things that can answer it. Even the Kangaroo is going to become hard for him to answer. We finally... This thing that's moving out in the open just gets wiped out by a Kangaroo, so... I've always sort of wondered why they called it a Kangaroo. Like, a bunch of the stuff you'd almost think the Canadians were the Aussies, given the names of it, but... whatever. Infantry setting up here, they're going to start firing away at the Panzergrenadier and the IG-18. Our Assault Pioneers aren't doing all that well there, and they're able to get some good bombing runs down, napalm down on my units here, which is pretty unfortunate. Forced to fall back with my fighters, but my opponent at this point in time, like, you can see that my strategy sort of worked. My understanding of this faction has, to a large extent, worked. Do lose another Sherman, if I recall here. Oh no, okay, I managed to get away. When do I lose this one? I don't remember if I lose this one or not, actually. But either way, running up with a Firefly against the Marder. This is kind of a bad matchup for the Firefly in some ways, but we're able to shake this unit a little bit, so we're able to sort of force it to fall back, and I think we kill it. Maybe not, but either way, it doesn't really matter if we do or not. All we need to do is zone my opponent out from taking out any more terrain, capturing any more ground here. And here you can see, like, we're just opening fire on a bunch of stuff there. So, yeah, at this point in time, you can sort of see, like, we're starting to basically win the match here. And a lot of this comes about from me understanding the matchup and knowing when to push and what sort of things I should be focusing on wearing down, and why I can, most importantly, like, I know what I can afford to lose in these matchups. It's very important in this game to understand what you can afford to sort of throw away, and in this particular case, in this particular matchup, it's actually okay to throw away lots and lots of your infantry, lose tons of them, because if you sort of sacrifice lots of infantry and they sort of get down to a couple points or whatever, or what have you, or they're sort of forcing my opponent to lock down an area or what have you, then that's time that my opponent's not using to destroy my more important sort of stuff here. My ram here, I think I lost my Firefly to a Stug, and this is what I was saying, like, the Firefly is so goddamn useless. Able to finally just get this stupid Panzergren out of there. And we get into a big air battle here. I think we lose a bunch of stuff to the Flanker Wolf 1090, but not really that big a deal. I think I lose, I lose a couple Spitfires, I think. Did I lose that one? Yeah, that one goes down. Bit of a shame. But either way, we can see, like, this push continuing along the side here. We got, like, a Wolverine and a Ram pushing forward, and, like, you know, my opponent has nothing left on the side that can defend against tanks. He's pushing forward to some more units here, but these guys aren't going to be able to defend against the Ram and the Wolverine operating in tandem, especially if the rifles are sort of pushing forward in front of them. And even if they could, it wouldn't have mattered. I'm at +2 now. We're getting more points as we sort of progress this. Coming in against Flanker Wolf 190, pretty hard. Not able to get it. Both of us are forced to fall back because of the Flak Verling. Junker 68 coming in and going to be able to do a pretty good bombing run, but, you know, whatever. He has got a little bit of Sob Troop in at this point in time, but it's probably a little too late in many respects. Stug 4 again. We're still not worried too much about those Stugs. I think I'm pulling back these guys at this point in time, but you know, he could have really gotten forward here in a big way much earlier, and that would have helped him out tremendously. Storm Pioneers over here getting kind of wasted, but I think we're able to push forward pretty effectively with this Wolverine, if I recall. Yeah, we finally get that done. Off-map's not going to matter at this point. I don't have any troops there anyway. He could have just pushed forward into this area, and there's nothing I could have done to stop him. Yeah, so the Wolverine gets taken. Wolverines are crap. Infantry here are getting absolutely shredded to pieces by a combination of a Stug and MG42 and the Flak Verling. But, you know, only got a few seconds left before I win, and there it happens. So, and you can see here going into this, like, it was very important for me to be able to kill off the stuff that could fight as tanks. And by the end of the game, like, I had a lot of armor and vehicles that sort of pushed forward into him, and he was becoming less and less capable of answering against it. On the left flank, he had concentrated all of his anti-tank stuff, and at the end there, I could have actually been in a bit of a pinch if the match went on any longer. But he didn't push forward quite at the right time as far as that goes, and I could have answered by putting down some 17-pounders on that side, so it wouldn't have been that clean anyway. So you can see that I didn't really get any kills with 17-pounders, which is a bit unfortunate. And we lost a ton of stuff here as well, but, you know, that's fine. It's okay to sort of sacrifice lots of things. We can see from kills here, you know, lots and lots of deaths on our side. We actually lost more than we killed. And, you know, that's fine. You have to remember what the objective of a particular match actually is. It's not to get kills. So as long as I'm able to sort of keep him on the back foot and I'm able to sort of push forward, the sacrifice of lots and lots of infantry is going to let me push forward there and get a complete shutout victory, because that's what this is. And you know, having that pressure going forward against something like the SS Panzer Grenadiers works really well, because they don't answer against that sort of thing very well, because they're sort of more limited numbers against the Canadians there. So, anyway, hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time. Remember that this only applies to this particular matchup, because that's what I was talking about here. It's understanding what your matchup is and what you can do in that particular situation, but it changes so much depending on what other faction you're up against. If I was playing up against the Infantry 716, I think, let's go double check that. If I'm playing against the 716 Infantry, these guys can outnumber me really badly because of access to the Ostrup and stuff like that. They've got access to lots and lots of infantry that they can get in huge numbers. They've got access to a decent number of tanks, even though they're crappy tanks. They can flood the field with tanks if they want to. And if they're doing that sort of thing, and, you know, they can get lots of really good support guns out as well. If they're doing that sort of thing, then, like, I need to make sure that my troops are getting the absolute most utility out of themselves before they go down. It's very much not like the strategy that I played there. So I would have to be very careful, for example, against the Fusiliers. I would have to be very careful moving forward through open sight lines against the PaK 43s, and even the PaK 40 75mm that they've got access to. So, you know, the strategy has to change completely depending on who you're up against. And that's the most important thing to learn to this game, to figure out, you know, why it is that you're losing, why it is that the game's so hard. And it's mostly going to come down to not understanding what matchup you're in and what you're fighting up against. So, you know, it's going to take a little while. It's going to take playing against each faction a little bit, because looking at the numbers doesn't really tell you anything until you've actually played against those numbers a few times. So, hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.